Hello, my name is Jan Thielemann and today I want to show you the basics for the source code management tool Mercurial. So let us start with the installation. You can download Mercurial from this site. It's available for Mac, Windows and Unix systems. If you use Ubuntu, like I do, you can install it via apt by simply typing sudo apt-get install Mercurial and enter your password. So after the installation you have to configure your Mercurial, and on Unix systems, to configure your Mercurial you go to your home directory and create a file called .hgrc. This file is necessary because Mercurial reads a basic configuration from this file for each repository you have, and in my opinion it's a good idea to put in your user credentials into this file. So I already created it on my PC. Let's take a look at it. And as you can see, there is a section in these square brackets, and here I have the UI section where I have the username entered, which is in my case Jan Thielemann, with my email address. So that's enough for a basic configuration file. Enter your own name here and then save the file. Now every time you make a commit in one of your repositories, your username is automatically written into the commit message. Also, it's necessary for if you pull from other repositories or want to push to other repositories, then you have to be trusted by these other repositories, so you are allowed to push and pull from. So if you are using a Windows system, you will put this .hgrc file in your user profile directory. What also will work is if you create a file called Mercurial ini. So you have to create either this file or this file. The next step you have to do is to clone or initialize a repository. To show you how this could work, I will create a new directory. I call it Mercurial test, and I switch into this directory. And if I want to initialize a new Mercurial source code repository, all I have to do is to type in hg and init. So all Mercurial commands begin with hg, and yeah, that's the reason, because hg is the chemical sign for Mercurial. Now after I initialized the repository, I have a new directory in my source code directory. It's called .hg, and this directory stores some configuration files for Mercurial, as well as the history of all the changes in my repository. So let's take a look into this repository. And as you see, there are not many files yet, but normally you would like to create some files. For example, another hgrc file, which I do now. This time I don't have a dot at the beginning, and what I enter here, or what I can enter here, are some things. For example, I can enter the path where I want to push and pull from. I can enter users who I trust, so these users are allowed to pull and push to and from my repository, and also I could have several other hooks. So for the path, I add a new section called path, and here I have key value pairs. So I type in default equals, for example, path to my repository, and what I also could do is enter a default push path. What this does is that if I type in the command for pulling, it will pull from this repository, and if I type in push, the push command, it will push to this repository. Another thing I could add is the trusted section, where I can trust users. Like this, for example, or I can trust groups. Like this, for example. Yeah, other things I can add are extensions, for example, or hooks. And one of these hooks could be the incoming hook, where I can enter something which should get executed every time I have incoming changes in my repository. So if somebody other pushes into my repository, the command behind this equal will be executed. For example, if I have a centralized repository on my build server and I push to this repository, I could execute a build of the program via my build server. But I don't need this yet, so I delete this thing and go back to my repository. Now, after initializing my repository, I can start adding files to it. So now I'm making a new test file, and now I type in the stat command, which stands for the statues, and now it shows me the statue of all my files I keep track of with my repository. The question mark indicates that this file is not in the repository now, and to add it to my repository and to keep track of this file, I type in hg add. The add command adds all new files in my repository, and if I only want to add a certain file, I can type in hg-add and the name of the file. Now if I take a look at the stat again, I see that it is now added to my repository. One thing about Mercurial is that every action you do is not persistent until you commit your changes. So to commit this new added file, I type in hg commit. Now an editor opens where I can enter a commit message. Now I'll add another file, and I modify the first file. Taking a look at the statues again, and now I see I added one file and I modified another file. To make these changes persistent, I have to commit again, and if I accidentally added a file, I could reword this by typing in hg reword and the name of the file, and now we see that that the repository doesn't know about a file, because now it has the question mark here. So let's add it again. commit. And if you make a commit on the command line, you have this parameter called -m, where you can provide a commit message directly without the need to open an editor to type in your commit message. Now we don't have any changes, and we can take a look at the history. And here we have an overview of what happened. And in Mercurial, every change you committed gets a number. This number is only for the change set in your local repository. Mercurial is a distributed source code management system, and in different spaces of the repositories, for example one of my PC and one repository, the same repository is on the PC of a coworker, these numbers are not unique, but the number behind is a unique ID, so it is only available once, this number, and Mercurial uses these numbers to identify change sets and to merge them together. Okay, the next thing is branches. Like in most source code management systems, you are able to branch your code, and this is especially useful if you have big projects and you want to make a bigger change to your code. So instead of developing in only one branch, which could cause the whole project to not build anymore, you can create a new branch and do your changes in there, and then when you're done and everything works and everything is tested, you can merge your changes back into the development branch, for example. To get an overview about which branches are there in your repository, you type in hg branches, and as you can see here, there's only one branch now. And to add a new branch, you type in hg branch and provide the name for the new branch. Now I am in the new branch by typing in hg branch without a name. You get the branch you are currently in, and as you see, in the branches there's still only one branch, the default branch, and that's because the new branch is not persistent taken into the repository now. So what I do is I have to make another commit. And now I can see my new branch. So let's add another file in this new branch. Add it to the repository. And make the changes persistent. Whoops, I forget the -m parameter. So taking a look at the history, I see that I added a new branch and added a new file to this branch. And to switch between branches, I use the update command. So I can use the written word update, or simply typing in hg up, and now I have different possibilities to update to other change sets. I could, for example, use the number of the change set in my local repository. I could use the unique number of the change set. I also could use the name of the branch, and I'm available to use markers or bookmarks, which I can also create. So now I want to update to my default branch. I can say update default. And as you can see, the test3 file I just added is not available in my repository anymore. But Mercurial, the repository, still keeps track of this file. So if I go back to my new branch, the new file is available. Now if I made some changes in another branch and I want to merge them together, it's important to update to the branch in which you want to merge. For example, if I want to merge the new branch into my default branch, I first update to the default branch and then type in hgmerge and the name of the branch I want to merge. This again does not make the changes persistently or permanent. So if I take a look at the repository, I can see the new file, but I have to commit my changes. If I made accidentally changes, like I merged with the wrong branch, what I can do to forget about the changes is using the update command with the -c parameter, which stands for clear, and it clears all the changes I have currently in my repository. Another thing I want to show you is the hgignore file. This is a configuration file which is not placed in the .hg folder but directly into my repository. So I create a new file here, call it hgignore, and what I can do here is to enter some information about files I want to ignore, so the repository doesn't keep track of these files. Yeah, and to do this, I have two options. I can use the global syntax, or I can use regular expressions. And yeah, most cases I had, it was enough to use the global syntax. And I do this by typing in syntax global. And now I can ignore files based on their name or on their extensions. So in Java, when you build a project, you get a bunch of class files, and these class files change every time you build the project. And Mercurial would try to keep track of these class files too if you don't ignore them. And what I like to do is to put these class files in here, in the hgignore file. And now, if I create a new class file, and I type in hgstat, you see Mercurial simply ignores this file. However, the hgignore file is a file Mercurial want to keep track of, so I add this, commit my changes, and I'm fine. Other useful commands are the hgout and in command, or outgoing and incoming. And what these commands do is, if you have a repository from where you pull and push, it shows you which change sets will be transferred to the remote repository, or which change sets there are in the remote repository which you could pull to your local system. Now another command you probably will use is the clone command. And what it does is it clones a repository, a remote repository. And by remote, I mean it could also be on your local machine. For example, I can clone the repository I created for this tutorial. So I type in hg-clone, and here I enter the name of the path of the repository, which is Mercurial test in my case. And now I can provide a destination to where I want to clone this repository to. Now I change to the cloned repository. I add another file here. Add this file. Commit my changes. And now I can see that I have a change set in this repository which is not in the remote repository from which I cloned. The advantage of cloning a repository is that you get the HGRC file automatically. And if you take a look at it, you see that the default path is automatically created. Now I go back to the repository I created at first, and here I can use the HG. Okay, I can't use this command because in the default the default path is not the path to where I cloned from. So I will change this quickly. And now I see, if I type in the incoming command, that my remote repository has changes from here. So I can pull these changes by typing in hg-pull. I can pull only a certain branch or a certain bookmark or even change sets. Or I could go back to the other repository and use the pull command. The push command, I mean. And now I see I added some change sets with certain changes and one new file. So yes, these are the basics about Mercurial. I hope it helps, and if you have more questions about Mercurial, there's a great help site calling hginit.com, and yeah, this is a very good starting site if you want to learn more about Mercurial. It has great examples, and it reads really good. So now if you want to start developing for iDempiere and you have installed Mercurial, the first thing you want to do is to clone the iDempiere repository, which you can find here on bitbucket/iDempiere/iDempiere. And since this repository is larger than 1 GB, I recommend you to clone with the SSH path. So I copy this path, and now I clone the repository, and what it will do is it will create a directory called iDempiere. But since I already have a repository from iDempiere, I provide another name, hit enter, and yeah, Mercurial will start cloning the repository. So that's the basics of using Mercurial, and I hope to see you in the next video.